Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Great. So good to see you all came back. I'm so happy. Our last session, I have been really looking forward to this. I hope you have too. This is our Tone at the Top panel discussion. The tone at the top is important for setting expectations in an organization and setting the foundation for how good public business is to be conducted. This panel will discuss the importance of tone from the top in their organizations and local government entities, examples of positive, negative consequences related to having or not having an effective tone at the top, and strategies for implementing an effective tone at the top, and our panelists will answer any related questions that we have. So I'm just going to go through a list of questions. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce, of course, you know, Dr. Christel Slaughter. Just to kind of highlight part of her bio that I didn't get to mention earlier, some of her recent work includes leading the cultural organizational transformation of a publicly traded community bank, designing and implementing an award-winning customer service program for a large healthcare institution, leading an ongoing organizational development, design, and build-out of the Louisiana Emergency Response Network, and designing integration strategies for the state of Louisiana's multi-billion-dollar coastal protection and restoration efforts. She's a busy lady, y'all, let me tell you. And new today to our panel is Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid. She is Louisiana's Commissioner of Higher Education. She is currently the only female in the country to have served as a state higher education leader in multiple states. Reid is a proven advocate for students who has worked effectively at campus, state, and federal levels. She was recognized nationally as the 2020 Exceptional Leader by the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. Along with the Louisiana Board of Regents, Reid leads the state's talent development efforts focused on increasing educational attainment, erasing achievement gaps, and increasing prosperity. In January of 2023, she was named one of the nation's top 10 Black higher education leaders by Forbes, which stated Louisiana's top higher ed exec is unrivaled, the absolute best among the state level leaders. Please welcome Ms. Kim Reid. We also have Mr. Joel Robideaux. He is the Town of Simsport Fiscal Administrator, but before that, he had 20 years. He owned and operated a successful accounting firm in Lafayette, serving individuals, families, and businesses before being elected as Lafayette Parish Chief Executive. In 2004, he was elected to the Louisiana House of Representatives. As a member of the Louisiana House of Representatives, he served in many leadership roles, including Speaker Pro Tem, Chairman of the House and Ways Committee, Chairman of the Joint Legislative Committee on Capital Outlay, Chairman of the Retirement Committee, and as a Louisiana State Bond Commission member. During his tenure as state representative, Joel was recognized by his colleagues with the coveted Hudson Cup, the Gentleman of the House Award for the legislator who most exemplifies the qualities of decorum, respect, humor, and leadership during the 2013 legislative session. In 2015, Joel was elected as Lafayette's mayor president, and he served in that role for 4 years. Please welcome Mr. Joel Robideaux. All right, so I'm going to ask them a series of questions. We're going to kind of make this organic, so if you have any questions throughout, when the time comes, we'll get to those questions. So the first question is to all of our panelists. When you hear tone at the top, what does it mean in the context of government and public trust? So whoever wants to answer, feel free.
Let Christel start. Okay, thank you, Joel. Ladies first. When we were sent the notes about this panel today, I thought the term tone at the top was a very interesting term. I hadn't thought about it very much. And since then, I've heard it over and over again. So apparently, I was just out of the loop on that. I have to say that I think it is absolutely one of the most critical and influential factors in any entity, whether it's local government, whether it's a mayor's office or some subdivision of local government, all the way up through state agencies, to the governor, and even in federal agencies and out of the White House, where we've had the opportunity and the privilege to work at all those levels. The tone at the top makes all the difference. And it's very helpful when the leader at the top articulates what their expectations are, even in a very broad sense, even in a very sort of just general, somewhat strategic sense about their expectations. I think that when people know that their elected or appointed official has the expectation that people will perform at a certain level, that people will provide good services to the citizens, that people will be expected to operate in an ethical way with integrity, then it's not a surprise when, if someone steps out of line, doesn't do what they're supposed to do, that there are consequences. And I think that those are the ways that people really begin to filter what they hear, feel comfortable asking questions. Well, now that I've heard this, are we going to continue to do these things? Are we going to switch over to these things? I remember after Katrina in Jefferson Parish, they elected a new parish president, and we were in the process of doing some project. And he called me in and he said, I want us to be the best parish government that anyone can ever remember. I want us to be absolutely the best. I want us to be ethical, above board, full of integrity. And he went so far in that his department heads took him literally. And then they began to get complaints about the inspectors, about people who were going out and having to approve permits and things like that, because they began to tighten up on everything. Now, the good news is that just needed a little bit of a dial back, right? Okay, I didn't mean literally you had to do every single thing by the book. I expect you to use good judgment, et cetera, but they took it as no more judgment. This is coming from the parish president. I'm on it. And it was very interesting alone in his office to have a conversation about what do you really mean? Because if you want to do this literally, you think you have developers calling you and citizens and people calling you now, you'll continue to. If you have a situation where people are not sure, maybe they need to talk to their department head and they can ask you for clarification, or you need to say, I want you to make the best judgment. If this was your home, would you accept the steps like this? If this was your place of business, would you want people to approve something? He said, that's what I want. He said, I want common sense, but I want the right thing. I said, okay, then let's figure out how we say that. But literally in a nanosecond, you saw people's behavior change. And that's how powerful elected and appointed officials can be, especially when you've had something as dramatic as Hurricane Katrina and people coming back at that and being emotionally raw and really wanting to do the right thing. So I just have watched so many situations. That's probably the most dramatic in that way. But I really do think that, those of you who maybe are right below or are in significant leadership positions beneath the tone at the top, you have an interesting job because you're having to interpret that for the work that your people do. And I think it can make a big, big difference.
Yep. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Good afternoon to everyone. Wonderful to be with this panel. When I think about tone at the top, I think about the fact that organizations reflect their leaders. And as Christel was talking about, the expectation, the culture, the value, all of those things come from the leader, and so organizations are reflecting on that. What is our vision? What is our expectation? What do we value? So those are the things that I think about when I think about leadership and tone at the top. Obviously, we think about great leaders at every level. How are they effectively getting work done? How are they setting a vision that people are excited to be a part of? How are they setting expectations? And how are they setting accountability measures so that people understand what is the expectation here, and how are we going to do good work? How are we going to affirm good work? How are we going to train so that people are exceeding expectation, and that there's no gray area around the expectation there? So I think the tone at the top is, as you mentioned, very important, but it needs to make sure that it is reflecting the organization, supporting and growing an organization that allows people to be their very best and to exceed expectations.
Thank you. I'm reminded of someone telling me when I was deciding to run for mayor president in Lafayette that, you know, all politics is local, and be careful what you want, because my 12 years at the state were enjoyable, but I can say that all politics is local. The 4 years that I spent in local government led my wife to say, "You've put 16 years in, please don't do this anymore." So I ended up not running for re-election. But I will say, I mean, there's all different types of leadership qualities and methods out there. But truth be told, I mean, if your leader, your elected leader or leader of your department or agency leads with fear and intimidation, I mean, the reality is there may be some results, but it's going to be short term. That, you know, and I'm going to sound naive to a degree, but I feel like I've been in the shoes, so I have the luxury of being naive about it. But if you serve where you collaborate with everyone that works for the municipality or the government agency, where you serve with some level of warmth and genuine feelings for the people that work for you, then that municipality or that agency is going to be infinitely more successful in the long run than it could ever be with somebody that's just dropping the hammer and leading with fear and intimidation. And so we'll get more into a lot of what all the responsibilities are. But I would say that for those of you that are in a situation that may not be ideal, it's your responsibility to demand that respect is given, and that it is a collaborative effort, because ultimately we're all in our positions to serve. And if you really are going to serve, then you need to demand that it's done in a way that is sustainable and that is going to be long-term to benefit everyone and for a long time. So I'll leave it at that for right now.
Well, you can hold the microphone because the first question is for you, Mr. Robideaux. From your experience serving as a public official at multiple levels of government, state, parish, and now local, how have you seen leadership behavior influence public trust, fiscal integrity, and accountability?
Okay, well, I'll point the finger at myself first. So I remember when I got elected mayor president, maybe it was 2 years in, there was some tax renewals that were coming up, and they were pretty, what I would consider basic tax renewals. Well, I think one was for law enforcement and one was for drainage. So, you know, I took it for granted. No renewal in Lafayette Parish had ever failed for those things. And so I wasn't really paying attention, putting forth really much effort to get them passed. But that was at a time when there was a bunch of library issues, and they actually had a renewal on the ballot. And so there was this undercurrent of public frustration with all of government that you end up getting painted with. And so those millage renewals failed. And I remember that was 2 years in, and felt like I was doing a pretty good job. And then all of a sudden I had to face, well, wait, you know, 20 million of drainage funding just disappeared. And same in law enforcement. I mean, I thought law enforcement was, you know, something that you didn't have to work very hard at. And so I had to spend, you know, the next several months really kind of going on a tour and educating the public and saying, look, this is what this money is spent on. This is what it's for. You can you can, vote the way that your conscience tells you to vote, but you need to at least be an informed voter. And it's my fault that you weren't informed on what this money was going to be used for. So I'm here to tell you what that is now. And they ended up passing fairly easily, over 60%. But it was just because I took the time to be open and transparent and make sure that everyone had their questions answered on what that money, what their tax dollars were going to be used for. So that's, you can't take the voters for granted because they are the ones that fund government. For everything that any of us do, the funding comes from them. And so they need to be included in a way that they do feel like they are part of all the good that you're working towards and to make their community that much better. So I would say that's the one that comes to mind for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. To Dr. Slaughter, with 20 plus years advising government entities, what common leadership traits have you found that either foster integrity or undermine it?
Well, leadership traits, I'm sort of a leader groupie. I love watching leaders. Two of my very favorite are my fellow panelists, I must say, and both of them know it because I've told them that. And Kim especially, because I run into her all the time. She's just a paragon, and Joel, I wish she was still at the legislature and running a whole lot of other things. I think that personality and leadership traits are intertwined in a lot of cases. We do a lot of personality assessments. Some are very valid and reliable, and some are just for fun and for team building to help you maybe get a snapshot of yourself. When we do executive searches or when we go in to help do a cultural change, we oftentimes rely on a very validated leadership assessment and personality assessment to help guide us with an elected official or an appointed official in helping them to achieve their strategy. I've looked at so many of these profiles with one particular assessment that we do that I can immediately spot where we're going to have some issues. Certainly there's the spectrum of where you cross over sort of what Joel was describing from someone who is approachable and wants to listen and is collaborative to someone who is not, who is hard to deal with, hierarchical, not a good listener, doesn't really care to be informed with what's really going on or what people care about, all the way then to the edge of being unethical or being a person who sort of feels like the end justifies the means. I think that every once in a while we get leaders like that, and I pray for you if you're in that situation. Somebody came up at the first break and told me a little story about that, and I think that, if you can, talk to that person. If you can help bring in resources and help them understand, look up laws, guidelines. I took advantage of being here today to ask a couple of questions about clients to Judy about local government, the LLA, and where would we look for that information? Where is that on the website? I'm sort of big on, I guess it's a little bit manipulative. Like I'm not going to think that you really don't or want to ignore the law. I'm going to assume you don't know. I'm going to assume that certainly this is an oversight, and let me share with you or let me help bring somebody to the table who can help with good information. If they choose not to do that, then probably over time I'm lucky enough as the outside person that I can choose to work with another agency or client. When you're inside of an organization like that, it's very difficult. When you just move to bad leadership, I think what you see a lot of times is personal agendas. I think you see people who really are not there for the altruistic, mission-driven purpose of the organization. I love working with purpose-driven leaders. They care about the results. They care about their people. And surveys show if you care about your employees, they will care about your customers. It's just not that hard. So when you begin to see a leader who wants to invest in professional development, who wants to hear what employees have to say, I can tell you that's an organization that's going to do very well. So little thoughts about that.
Wonderful. The next question is for Dr. Reed. In higher education, tone comes from many directions: boards, chancellors, presidents. How do you align leadership voices into a coherent tone across a system?
It's a great question. I will say that coming off of what Christel was talking about purpose-driven leadership and purpose-driven work. For me, as Commissioner of Higher Education, we have a statutory responsibility, constitutional responsibility to set a strategic plan for higher education. We did that in 2019, Louisiana Prospers, and we said we want at least 60% of our population to have a credential value by the year 2030. So the development of that strategic plan, which we have said is the state's plan, not just the higher education plan, because talent development is everyone's business, right? And we all benefit when we do that. But you can't do this work in a silo, and we don't have the ability to say, this is it, take it or leave it, my way or the highway. Our work is co-created, it is collaborative, as Joel mentioned, because we need the institutions and the systems to buy in. The Board of Regents doesn't graduate one student. And so I can't get to 60% educational attainment or 85,000 graduates a year if the institutions and the systems don't see themselves and see value in the vision and the plan. So I think to your specific question about how do you sort of harmonize the soloist and unify the voices, it's around saying, here is the big vision. And wouldn't it be amazing when we get there? When we stand in the future together, what will it look like for Louisiana? And how can we, as the Board of Regents, our role in policy and advocacy, working with great legislators, governors, how can we help to get you there and to support and do the kind of blocking, tackling, advocacy that you need? But you've got to have, I think, this ability to have purpose-driven conversations, data-informed decisions, and to rally people around a vision of something greater than what we have today. And people buy in. I think people want to be a part of something great. I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to speak to Elizabeth. Elizabeth Bentley-Smith is here from our team, Deputy Commissioner for Administration and Finance. And she's in a fellows cohort. And we were talking about leadership and this work. And I said to her class of fellows, you can't get people fired up about a mediocre vision, right? You got to go big or go home. People want to be a part of something big and great. And if it's ambitious or they see it as something that's beyond their reach, you have to explain why it's important and how we're going to get there together. And you have to acknowledge that this is going to be hard work and that we're going to get there together. And I think that's the kind of work that allows us to share in a big vision and actually achieve the big vision as well.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm taking lots of notes over here. This question is to all of our panelists. Strong leaders are often decisive, but public service requires collaboration. How can leaders balance authority with the need to work cooperatively with councils, boards, and other elected officials?
The non-doctor has to start. It seems unfair. I feel like earlier when I talked about what I felt like was important in leadership, it seemed a little soft. But in the question, you said decisiveness, and so that has to be part of whatever form of leadership that you're going to undertake. And so the toughest thing is that, I guess the best problem to have is that you're going to have a lot of talented folks underneath you, right, when you're an elected official. And they're going to have strong opinions, which you want, and you want that collaboration because a multitude of ideas is always going to result in a better solution than just one that's being driven by one individual. And so that collaboration has to exist at all levels, including all the way down to the public. And that can be, trust me, extremely frustrating. I get that because it's thousands of voices that with social media now are making themselves heard very loudly on what you should be doing and questioning every decision that's being made. But ultimately, if you don't have collaboration, then I feel like you're going to end up in a place that's not as good as what it could have been. Now, I'm in a unique role right now as a fiscal administrator, which is an interesting section of law that exists in Louisiana. And for lack of a better term, you're kind of the benevolent dictator, right? I mean, they've pretty much turned over the fiscal decisions from the elected officials who are served now in advisory roles only, and you are making all the decisions. And so it would be much easier, much quicker, probably more efficient for me to just go in there and make every decision and say, this is how it's going to be, here's what we're cutting, here's what we're doing, all right, let's go on and move forward. But if, as fiscal administrator, that's what you do, well, did you train anybody to continue that for when you're removed and out of fiscal administration? Is that community going to fall right back into where they were before because no one there has learned what it takes to actually run a municipality? And it's not that simple. I mean, there's you could own your own business and run that business, but there's these nuances in the Larson Act and other laws that are out there that are unique. And so I feel like the role of being the fiscal administrator is to make sure that I share the logic behind whatever decisions I'm ultimately making, and including them in as much as possible the decision-making process that ultimately I have to decide, but I don't want to just alienate the entire community by going in there and making all these decisions for them without also training them. And so collaboration, at every level, state, local, is important. I wish we had a Kim for every situation. I saw Tom Brady cloned his dog. Maybe we can clone Kim and have her be able to go around and serve in leadership roles all over the state. That would be fantastic.
That is a very scary thought. Right? A Kim in every agency, very scary thought. I will appreciate you, Joel, and I will say that, when I think about this question, I think about sort of the just right porridge, right? So you think about the leaders in our world who are hardened in their decisions, do not want to hear what anyone else has to say, and they undercut the talent that's around because nobody gets to weigh in. It's just my way or the highway, and as I mentioned that before. Then you think about the leaders on the other side that will spin themselves into just one more data point, just one more idea, just one more piece of information because they're afraid to make a decision because the buck stops at the top and they don't want to be held accountable for the wrong decision. So they can't get there. They can't understand that you will never have perfect information, so you've got to use the best information you have to get there. And so I don't know if you all have had the benefit of working with those kinds of leaders or the challenge, but I have. And so that I think about my work as the sort of the just right in the middle porridge, right? So I oftentimes, when I'm thinking about decisions that have to be made, I will think about what is the best decision and what does the information tell me and what does history tell me about that work. Then I will ask the team, tell me about your thoughts, right? And if you have a group of individuals who are independent thinkers and you've set a culture in an organization where independent thought is encouraged and welcome, you will get a range of opinions, as Joel mentions, that helps you get to the very best decision. If you are in an organization where one person is like the Chief Justice and they speak and everybody else says what they said, right? I'm not going to weigh in because I don't want to disagree with Christel or with Joel because they are the most important person in the room, then you don't get the best decision, and it is your responsibility to assign someone to be the counterpoint to the most important person in the room. If people feel silenced or feel afraid to share their opinion, then the work is not at optimal level. And so you have to think about that in organizational behavior. What is happening when tough decisions have to be made? Are people leaning into it and saying, here's what I think, let me give you a different perspective? Or are people sitting back and waiting for you to make the decision because they don't want to make the wrong decision, or they don't want to cross or disagree with the person that's in the room? These are very important conversations that really speak to the culture and the ability for our organizations to thrive and to prosper and to develop the next generation of talent. Because all of us are watching, right? We were all young professionals who got to see what was happening in these rooms, whether we had an opportunity to speak to what was happening or not. And so you watch what happens with great leaders, how they encourage people. They say, well, Christel, I haven't heard your opinion yet. Joel, I don't know what you think. You haven't said anything yet. Let me hear what you have to say. And then they say to the group, I honor all of your opinions. And they either say, I'm going to think about it and get back to you quickly, or they say, this is the decision I think we need to make, and I need to make sure everybody in this room will agree with it because it is an organizational decision and we will move forward. So you ask for consensus and you seek that and you're decisive in the decision. So long answer to the question, but I think it speaks to really how do we build teams, how do we honor teams, and how do we set expectations for independent thought and independent conversations?
You know, I'm going to take a slightly different tack because I think my colleagues have done a great job. I want to talk about you all. I don't want to talk about people above you because I can't do anything about that, and you can't really either. You can influence, but you can't control. But you have a lot of control over yourself and what you do. And I want to tell you about a few people that I've worked with that I think have been amazing and done an outstanding job from their position, which is not an elected or appointed leader of a major entity, organization, agency, municipality, et cetera. And what catches me in the question are councils, boards, or other elected officials. So let me talk about councils and boards for a minute. I find them fascinating. They're just, and I'm looking at one of my clients in the room, and he knows that I'm looking right at him as I say this. He has maybe one of the most fascinating commissions board that I've ever worked with, and I worked with him 20 years ago, and I'm working with him again, and things have changed light years, good and bad in both ways. I think that very smart leaders, department heads, even if you're in a very small municipality and you maybe only have 2 people, but you are the human resources director, or you are in charge of a function of government that has to go to council for approval, for example, you can make or break your municipality. If you know how to do this, and you know how to begin by interviewing the person, finding out what's important to them, understanding their approach. Is this important? Is it not? If it is important, what are the pieces that are important to you? I'll use New Orleans as an example. We've done 2 major compensation studies under 2 different civil service directors. Both were very talented, but very different styles. But both of them sent us first to every single council member to invite them to meet with us before we even began the study. And that was one of the smartest things that anyone has ever done, because we went in there cold. It was like, we're a blank slate. Do you care about this? Do you believe that our city employees are underpaid? Do you understand the balance between trying to give actual salaries versus more benefits? Do you understand the interplay with this? Do you want more information? How do you want to be involved in this project? We had everything from, I didn't even want to meet with you, I was just told you were coming, to, I am vitally interested. In fact, the current mayor, the incoming mayor of the city of New Orleans was a tough nut. She wanted to meet a lot. Helena Moreno wanted to understand things. She would call us back. She would say, I went back over my notes. Why are the people in this department so far below where they ought to be in the market as opposed to these? And I don't mind elected officials like that on boards and councils. They're not doing that to make your lives difficult. They're not doing, sometimes they are, they have an agenda, but a lot of times it's really because they do want to understand and they're interested in it for some reason. And I think when we get inside of government, we have a tendency to paint these people with a broad brush. The council, the board, the commission. And then when we have the one person who wants more information, they're kind of a problem. I love my cell phone caller ID. I'm telling you, you ever have that where you're looking at that? Oh, I really don't want to answer that call right now, right? That's Councilwoman so-and-so. That's Councilman so-and-so. But guess what? You can be the person that makes a difference. If you happen to be, this is your pothole person, this is the person who asks about this is their pet project, and you happen to be in that area, you can make your elected officials look incredibly good, or you can really hurt them just by simply not being responsive, not giving them the information they need. My motto is no surprises. And when I watch my clients who are elected officials, yes, you were elected. You might have run away with the election, but guess what? You're not getting a whole lot done without that council or with that other body with you. You might be the CEO or executive director of this agency, but you have a board that is also very powerful and appointed, and they are your bosses. And so you better learn how to work with them. You better learn how to deal with them. And there's a special art to that. So I want to really challenge you to think about, are there some people that maybe you ought to be meeting more frequently with? Are there some people that you don't really know what they're going to ask when they get into a public meeting? There should be no surprises coming your way. There should be no surprises going their way. So to me, great collaboration starts with building those relationships, really understanding people. And I think that those of you in this room, and I said this earlier, who are here are really the bright spots in the people who are joining virtually. You really can make an enormous difference. And you're long-term public servants, a lot of you. You're going to be there. Mayors will come and go. Councils will come and go. But you will have that reputation, and you will be the go-to person. And that's a wonderful thing to have because you're help influencing the entire outcome of your organization. So I put a lot of faith in you all.
Can I add to that? I really appreciate Christel making those comments, and talking about no surprises. The other thing that I think about in terms of you doing great work is anticipating the question that you're going to be asked. Because each one of us, as I think about boards and councils and legislators, there is a person who's going to ask about affordability. There is a person who's going to ask about early childhood and college campuses. There is a person who's going to ask about fiscal health or audit. And so when you have in your presentation before they ask, the slide that says, and here's where we are, and Representative Slaughter, I know you were going to ask about this, so we anticipated that question. Here's the data for the last 5 years. In your folder is a backup information about that. You can see that smile, right? And you're really trying to make those relationships and connections. And so I do think it is important, the anticipating of what you're going to be asked, providing good information, and taking the time to meet with people about what they value and what they care about. When I started in this job as a young higher ed professional, there was a female in Indiana, Teresa Lubbers, who was Senate Education Chair and then became Commissioner of Higher Education. And she said to me, Kim, remember this in these jobs. When you go to the legislature, look to see what the person does and what their background is, who you're meeting with, because you can find common ground with everyone, and it is your job to do so. And if you can make that connection, you will get good work done. And if you don't bother to do the homework and understand the humanity and the connection with people, you will not get good work done. So it's on you to do that. And so I do think those are important points for all of you as professionals here in Louisiana.
Great. Thank you so much. This next question is for Dr. Slaughter, and you do answer my call when I call you, Christel, so I'll take that as a compliment. Dr. Slaughter, can you share an example where collaboration or lack thereof either strengthened or weakened internal controls in a government body that you've worked with?
Well, this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart because it happened fairly recently. I have a client municipality that was going through some reorganization and some downsizing due to budget cuts, and I had sort of a one-man band person who happened to be female. One-man band is just the expression, who came to me with an organization chart that was very different in some ways from the current organization chart, and I was surprised at some of the things on it. One of the items or recommendations by the chart was to move internal audit, and I thought that was very curious. Move it out of the finance department and either move it directly under the mayor or directly under the council. I was very curious as to why someone would want to do that, especially when the finance department reported directly to this person. And so it took a little while to get around to that part of the conversation, but what I realized was the individual really wanted internal audit close to her because she wanted to direct their activities, including the finance department being audited. And once I realized that, I then began to look at this plate of spaghetti in front of me, and I actually worried that every single move on there might be personally motivated. And I said, who have you met with about this? And she said, well, no one. She said, you know, I'm in the mayor's office. We're going to be ready to present this. We're going to budget, and budget will follow this. And I said, I think we need to shop it a bit. Don't you think that would be a good idea? Let's just show it to a few people. Well, of course, that was, I mean, it immediately met with opposition, with lots of questions, with resistance. That was one minor change, honestly, in the whole reorganization package. I think when you have people who have the authority to do things and don't consult with others, you really end up with problems in an organization. And I think that, you know, being able to counsel them and share with them the importance of going into the organization and talking with others is important. I learned a long time ago as a consultant, people are smart. Citizens are smart. Your people are smart. No one knows the front line like a frontline worker. Nobody knows that. I've learned that in central garage agencies, fleet management, whatever you want to talk about. You want to know why things are not getting done well? Go talk to the guy in the front line. Go talk to the girl on the front line. Ask them, what do they need? What are the problems? What has changed? Oh, they can answer all your questions. The higher you go, the less you know. So the thought that we are that smart at the top and we ought to be able to do things and it's all going to work out fine, I think is just unbelievable hubris. I mean, it's just kind of crazy. So be smart, you know, consult people, listen to them, go out and do your homework. This example of, you know, internal audit, to me, had a lot of internal controls issues, as well as some of the other things that were being proposed. And I have to say, in a vacuum, people like that get traction, and the next thing you know, you realize our processes are really at risk. We're doing something that's very odd or off, and, you know, we need to go back and think about it. So I'm a big believer in collaboration and shopping those ideas before they become reality.
Mm-hmm. All right, our next question is for Mr. Robideaux. You've worked on both sides of the table as an elected official and now as a fiscal administrator stepping into struggling local governments. How do you distinguish between leadership issues that are normal management challenges versus those that pose real financial or ethical risks?
Yeah, so, you know, when I was asked to take on the fiscal administration for the town, I remember thinking that, all right, I'm going to do Waggersback this one favor, and because it wasn't something I was certainly looking to do, but I'm reminded that whatever level, and I thank Christel for reminding me that how little I know, because I'm the fiscal administrator, but as an example of that, I could make the argument that pretty much every decision that needs to be made has some fiscal element to it. And that's whether who you hire, do you hire them, every decision. But the reality is that's not what the role is about. It's not for me to control everything. And so I'll give you a real world example that I've dealt with, or I am currently dealing with for the town, is that I'm looking of where I can get this fiscal ship in order. And so, we're talking about a little over $1 million a year in revenue, right? And I've got these, I've got public works, and I've got a police department, and I've got a staff for the mayor's office, to all the normal things that you have to make decisions on. And so the police department is, when you add it all up, it's a little over $300,000 of that $1 million goes to the police department. And then if I look at history, there was, lawsuits that the town was faced with that had to do with law enforcement. And so my initial reaction was, I'm gonna cut the police out, right? That's 300 and something thousand that I can then really start to have the town in a position where it's flipping, and its head's gonna be above water, and we got to just figure out what to spend money on going forward. But going to different meetings with some of the councilmen and with the mayor, and then at council meetings, the public showing up and saying, look, I know it makes fiscal sense, right? Just on black and white sheet of paper to go ahead and get rid of that. But we're at the southernmost part of the parish, furthest away from the sheriff's department that you could possibly be. Everyone that's going to commit a crime in our parish is going to come and do it here, because they're going to know within a week that we no longer have a police department. And so it was a good reminder for me that, yeah, I had the right idea. It all sketched out on paper, but decisions are a lot more than just that, even when you're the fiscal administrator. And so now, right, I have to figure out, wait, how can I still solve this fiscal problem that this community's having, and possibly keep some semblance of law enforcement so that these people that live here, and look, the citizens were great. I mean, they were like, we don't want to be scared, right? We just want to know that we can go home, that our kids can ride the bike down the street to see their friends. And so it just reinforced again that you don't have all the answers. I really didn't need you to remind me that I don't have all the answers, Christel. And so again, it's always smart, and if you're going to be a good leader, to be able to step back and say, yeah, I was thinking about this in a very narrow way, which in that narrow way was an easy, correct decision, but the decisions that need to be made are much, much broader and much more complicated than that. And so that's kind of a real world example that I'm sure is going on in small communities all over the state. We're not the only ones faced with the cost associated with a police department, and whether or not we can afford that department. And so I sympathize with all the rural communities that are going through something similar. It just so happens this one's under fiscal administration, but it's the problems that exist outside of communities besides the ones that are in fiscal administration. So there's no easy decisions to be made as it relates to those types of issues.
Thank you. This next question is for Dr. Reed. It is a two-part question, so I'll repeat if necessary. In what ways can higher education leaders effectively collaborate with legislators and governing boards while still safeguarding institutional integrity? And do you believe that the strategies used in higher education can be adapted to support smaller institutions or local governments facing similar challenges?
So I'll start with the last question about the application of the work across organization. I think good organizational leadership can certainly be replicated regardless of the organization. So whether it's higher ed, local government, state agencies, certainly we can learn from each other. None of us have all the answers and none of us are getting it all right. And so I think this idea of continuous improvement, clearly you see Joel as a reflective leader, right? Taking in information, making better decisions, asking good questions. Those are the things that we all aspire to be able to do and do well. And so I think that's important work. The first question around institutional or academic integrity, right? So I think you mentioned legislators and governing boards. So the governing boards, the management boards in Louisiana, the LSU board, the Southern board, the LCTCS board, and the UL system, these boards have day-to-day management responsibility for the public institutions in Louisiana. And then the legislators, we're, at the Capitol with our hand held out saying, won't you help me, right? Trying to make sure that we're making the case for the investment in our people. And so at the end of the day, the institutions do have a responsibility to educate students well and to make sure that students are equipped to lead and to work, and that business and industry would hire more of our students because they are work ready on day one and leadership ready as well. So that is foundationally what we do. We do not have the ability, nor should we, to say the management boards don't matter or the legislature or governor does not matter, or the federal government for that matter. And so we are state supported. We receive federal dollars for federal financial aid, for grants, et cetera. And so with that comes a responsibility to answer the important questions and to try to build trust and confidence in the work that we do. So higher education obviously is in the news right now. Lots of conversations around questions around research grants being canceled. Lots of conversations around what's happening at the federal level with expectations for higher education institutions. You see campuses pushing back. You see tension that we haven't seen in the past around higher education because the energy traditionally, politically, has been around K-12, not higher education, yet here we sit. And so we do have a responsibility, I think, to not step back from it, but to step forward and remind people this is what we do every day, right? We help young people or people who are young at heart get the credential that allows them to support themselves and their family. And you as legislators give us funding because you expect us to fulfill that mission. At the heart of it, that is what we do each and every day. And so I think embedded in this question is a question about how do we do our work and protect the mission, the core mission of what we do, but still ensure that we are responsive and responsible for the individuals who are asking tough questions of us. And so I think that delicate dance and that balance is really important. Joel can tell you, things have changed at the Capitol. The gentleman of the Capitol of the legislature is not there at the legislature, this gentleman of the legislature. And so we do have the responsibility, as you all know, to navigate some really pointed questions. There are partisan conversations. There are culture war conversations. And yet we sit, in my role, in front of a legislature as the Commissioner of Higher Education, speaking on behalf of higher ed and advocating for the work we do. Never sitting in front of the legislature as Kim Hunter-Reid with her own personal opinions and her own thoughts about it, right? I'm never not representing all of higher ed, the 200,000 students we serve and the hundreds of thousands more who need to be served. So I do think it's an important question because it speaks to temperament and culture and vision and the ability to build relationships and to navigate tough politics on behalf of the work so that we can continue to do great work. And if we can't do that, then the work stops, people don't have confidence, they don't have trust, If they don't have trust, they will not support. If they do not support, we cannot do the work that we are called to do. So I appreciate that question very much. It is challenging times, but challenging times allow leaders to show what we're really made of and allow institutions to remind people of why we exist, and that's to serve the citizens of Louisiana.
Thank you. This question is to all panelists. Many frauds happen when the culture allows small lapses to grow. What practices set a strong example that prevents those lapses from growing? You look like you want to answer, Mr. Robideaux.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to answer that, but it's someone had touched on it earlier, and I don't remember which one of the doctors had touched on it, but it's it really is about the small things, in that if the small things grow, you're going to have situations where there are going to be shortcuts taken, and there's going to be people that are doing things for the wrong reason and violating and breaking the law. But I'm hesitant to word it this way, but I don't know any other way to word it. If someone is in a leadership role and they're bemoaning the bureaucracy that exists, which I have done, and the slow pace and all of the evils of bureaucracy, then that should alert everyone to start paying attention, because that's when the shortcuts are going to happen. And so if someone campaigns on a promise to eliminate the bureaucracy, or to do some of the things in a way that we're going to make it like a business, then either they don't really understand what they're saying and they're just using it as political rhetoric, or you need to start paying attention. And truthfully, all of the folks that registered for this conference, I think Christel said it earlier, you have the ability to slow the process down. I remember beating it into my kid's head. I wasn't a benevolent dictator as a dad. You have to learn to say no. Saying no is going to be the best tool I can give you as a parent. And I would say the same thing happens for everyone at every level of government in any agency, that it's your responsibility, whether you say it out loud or whether you figure out a way to slow the process down and make sure that I'm a nerd, that the I's are getting dotted and the T's are getting crossed. Everyone that's enrolled in this conference has the ability to slow the process down. Now, I'm not a proponent for slowing it down so that nothing gets done, right? I mean, people want to see accomplishments. They want things to happen. They want drainage improved and all of those things. So there's a fine line. But at the end of the day, someone that's just pushing is a recipe for disaster in government, because that invariably is going to lead to some unwanted consequences.
Thank you. This question is also for you. Drawing on your experience leading a parish government and now helping a town recover financially, can you share an example where tone at the top directly influenced financial outcomes or public confidence, for better or worse?
Okay, I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. I remember when I was running for parish president, you have your platform, and then you're going to roads and everything that you're going to try to accomplish and continue. And Lafayette was a little unique in that it was not like it was in trouble, right? Fiscally, it had a good tax base. But I remember someone comes to me at some function and says, "We want a no-kill shelter." Right? And I was like, okay, well, what do you mean by that? And they go through the whole animal shelter and say that we want a no-kill shelter. Well, so I was like, okay, well, that seems like something everybody can get behind, Well, so I'll add that. right? That's going to be something we're going to accomplish as a no-kill shelter. And I had no idea what the undertaking that I was going to be tasked with, because it sounds like something that everyone would be on board with, obviously. I mean, at the time, I think our animal shelter had a 9% survival rate for cats, maybe 40-something% for dogs. So I committed to a no-kill shelter. And so we had community meetings where I brought everyone in. And one of the tools that it takes in order to actually achieve that, no kill means 90%. You're always going to have food aggressions and behavioral issues with some animals that have to be put down. But 90% and above, you are classified as a no-kill shelter. And so I was like, okay, well, one of the things that really is required in order to achieve that is you've got to have this spay, neuter, ear tip, and return the animals. So like cats, for instance, we had to then pass an ordinance that said, okay, if you call me and you complain because one cat or two cats become 8 very quickly, then we'll go and we'll trap the cats, we'll bring them back, we'll spay, neuter them, we'll ear tip them so we know that they've been through the program, and then we're going to return them to where they are. Oh, everybody's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want them back. It's like, well, no. Well, where do you want me to put them? Well, I mean, we've got to so that became a 3-month meetings, right, to get the council on board, to say that, look, this is going to get us there, but it requires everybody to allow us to return those animals to where we trapped them. And then someone comes at one of the meetings and says, what about the songbirds? And I said, what about the songbirds? Well, if we're returning these cats, my songbirds, the birds that I have in my yard are in jeopardy. And I was like, well, they can fly. I mean, like, that's like they got the best defense of anybody, And so it just goes to show you. Now, we did get there, by the way. We got there, and I think Lafayette's had a no-kill shelter now. It took me 3 years before we actually achieved it, and it's continued. But it was not without a lot of effort, and it was on something that I thought was going to be just kind of a rah-rah, simple, we're done. All right, good job, Joel. Pat yourself on the back. It was a lot of effort. So I don't even remember what question you asked me, Lizzie. And I'm pretty sure I didn't answer it.
You did great. You did great.
I'll leave it at that.
May I just make one little comment to that? So as a volunteer, I got trapped, no pun intended, in the whole animal community, and Baton Rouge had a lot of opportunities for improvement. That was several years ago. When this new mayor came in, someone recommended me to him, and I went to a staff meeting, and he introduced me to his executive team, and William Daniel, who had been the chief administrative officer, who has a very cynical sense of humor, very wry, said, Mayor, may I just say something about your new consultant? The worst council meeting I have ever attended in my entire career was one where Christel came in to talk about cats and trap, neuter, release, and the Audubon Society came one by one for hours to the microphone about the songbirds. I feel like I'm reliving the experience right there. Don't go there, folks. I mean, it's wonderful, and we're a better community for it now. But yeah, so you don't know what you're getting into with those kinds of things. It's very true.
This question is for Dr. Slaughter. How can leaders communicate expectations about ethics and internal controls without creating an environment of fear or distrust?
Yeah, I love that question, because it's real easy to cross over to where people, Kim said it very well, a decision is a risk. And if you put yourself in a position of authority and you're not comfortable making decisions, then you're going to have a problem. And you can get as much data as you can, but at some point, if it's a formula, it's not really a decision. A decision implies risk. You try and mitigate it, but you do the best you can. Smart people, like Joel said, can come back and say, oh, I realize that was not a good proposal. Let us reframe it. Let us go back to the drawing board on it. And sometimes the public is forgiving and sometimes they're not. But the reality is that those are smart leaders who are able to do that. The question that Joel just had reminded me of something that I find very, very important. You know, we're used to, in organizations, having annual performance evaluations. And that just came into vogue as organizations got bigger and more complex, and they're kind of standard now. They're really awful. They're awful. For the most part, they're demotivating. Leaders don't like doing them. They don't put enough effort into it. People don't like receiving them. Now we're going to go back in December and talk about something that happened last February that I didn't even know, and you didn't tell me anything for 10 months. And, you know, just horror stories over and over again. When you start tying it to pay, all of a sudden people start playing the system and, oh, this person really needs a raise. I'm going to lose her if we don't give her a raise. And they go back and forth with the numbers to get them in the matrix. I've seen it all. It's terrible. But you know what really works? And look, all my clients have performance evaluations, so just get over it, live with it, do the best you can. But this is what you need to add to it. Instant feedback. Instant. I bring consultants to meetings with me, and we walk out in the parking lot. Even if we didn't ride together, I'm giving them feedback right then. I thought that was great when you inserted this point. I think when you started talking about the data on the slide, I think you kind of lost them. Did you see their eyes kind of glazed over? So I think we need to tighten that up next time. And people want that kind of feedback. It may not feel good at the moment if it's somewhat corrective, but that's how you keep things from going down the path to where they're bigger, they're worse. I should have told that person not to say it. I watched someone go to the microphone at a council meeting, a client's organization recently, and literally just tie a rope around his neck and jump off of a 2,000-foot cliff. I just couldn't believe it. The more they questioned him, the more he just proceeded to give them way too much information, very confusing. It didn't seem to make sense. And then he kept trying to explain himself. You know, he should have said, I really wasn't prepared for that. If you would let me go back and gather some information, I'll be happy to come back to you. He had been counseled about that problem. When you looked at the agenda, you could see that it was going to be a difficult topic, just the way it was worded. I watched his boss, get up and walk over to where the council and the camera couldn't really see him, but the evil eye was apparent to the young man at the microphone. It did not stop him at all. He literally turned so he didn't have to look at his boss's boss, give him the evil eye, because he was very intent on making the points that he was trying to make. When I'm telling you that that's a corrective situation that begs for immediate feedback, begs for it, right? I think that we have a tendency to want to collect that or think that's not going to happen again, or I'm not going to assume that this was an ethical transgression. They probably didn't know any better. Well, I like to give people the benefit of that doubt too, but I also want to reframe it in terms of this is how it could look. And you may have had no intention with that, but we really need to follow the process, or we really need to get this approval, or we really need to not shortcut things, because little things really do have a tendency to grow. And so I think if you can get in the habit of that, and then you're friendly with them, you're talking to them, you're continuing on like this is just something, we're all in this together. I'm trying to help you, you're trying to help me. Then you build a high performance culture instead of holding it all together and either exploding the next time it happens and it's worse, or wanting to take some kind of action against someone. You really just needed to give them sort of a good coaching session, a good counseling session, and then help them prepare for the future. So I really do think good leaders are very good at doing that.
This next question is for Dr. Reed. Higher education institutions often face unique risk. Grants, federal funds, student aid. How does Tone at the Top protect against misuse of resources in such a complex environment?
So I think Joel had a similar question about fraud, et cetera. And I think that it is important to understand whatever the dollars are, what is the use, the intended use and the allowable use, and then build in the kind of oversight and checks and balances that allows you to make sure that you are meeting expectations, that you're meeting deadlines, and that you're clear about how you're using dollars effectively and appropriately. When in doubt, ask questions, make sure that you are meeting all the deadlines for reporting and all of those things. But you're right, there are, a fuller range of dollars that are coming in, and which means a fuller range of rules around how to use those dollars, when to use those dollars. And so I think it is important that we ask good questions. We have the kind of oversight and checks and balances that allows us to meet the moment, and then we make sure that we are, if we have questions or lack of clarity, that we're asking the questions about it. But you misuse it, right? Then the buck stops with the top, right? So I think you do have to train for it. You have to ask the questions. Do we have enough auditors, oversight, et cetera? And are we doing things appropriately?
This next question is to all of our panelists. What are some of the most difficult challenges governmental leaders face when trying to set the right tone, especially in times of political pressure, budget cuts, or cultural resistance?
So I tell my team all the time, you got to bring your own positive energy to the game, right? These are challenging times, and I recognize that there's a lot of uncertainty. The work is really hard. So I think for us, one of the challenges is not just navigating uncertainty, but recruiting talent to be a part of the work that we do in times of uncertainty. We are only as good as the great talent that is part of our organizations. And so as we see people who are retiring, who are retirement eligible, who are getting out of the work, we think about what is the opportunity for us to build the next generation of talent, to build the next generation of leaders, and for people to understand how great it is to be a public servant, how honorable it is, how important it is to be a public servant and to serve our communities well and to serve our state well. And if we don't talk about the joy in the work and the service in the work, and if we don't have people who affirm the importance of the work, young people are going to say, I'm not going to be a part of that, right? I'm not going to be a part of something that's being criticized, that's being wrongly accused. I'm going to just go take my talent somewhere else. So I think the challenge is twofold for us, both navigating in very uncertain times, but also recognizing that we're in a talent war. Lots of people are being hired away from Louisiana or being hired into business and industry, the public sector. And so how are we building our own, growing our own culture and building our own talent? Internships. We're in a college town, right? Internships, apprenticeships, bringing people in and making them part of our organization early on. I can tell you, I have so many former graduate students and students who are now crushing it in our organization, but we built that talent, right? We got them young and we said, there's a place for you if you want to be a part of this, and you're going to grow with us and we're going to invest in you. And now I'm sitting back, mama proud, watching them do amazing work. And so I think that's important for us to think about as we navigate this work.
I'll repeat the question. What are some of the most difficult challenges governmental leaders face when trying to set the right tone, especially in times of political pressure, budget cuts, or cultural resistance?
Go ahead, Joel.
Okay, I'll say this as it relates to the legislature, right? When I served under Governor Blanco and then again under Governor Jindal, during those 12 years, I think there's 16 what they call standing committees: Committee on Education, Committee on Ways and Means, Retirement. You know, you have all of these different committees that handle the legislation as it relates to these certain topics. And so it was almost a 50-50 split between Republicans and Democrats. I was an independent at the time, that served as chair of these committees, right? Today it's 14-2. And that's just, I can remember going to a leadership conference, and as an independent, I think I was chairing the retirement committee at the time, and I was visiting with folks from other states, and they were like, that doesn't make any sense to us. How do y'all make any decisions? Like if the Democrats are in control of the legislature by one, they have every committee chair, they dominate the money committees, appropriations, and they make all the decisions. How do y'all do it there? How does it work? And I said, well, we're different in a lot of ways, but it works. And it forced everybody to collaborate and to work together. That's no longer the case, not just in Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana, I think, was really the last state to kind of adopt the federal model of partisanship. And regardless of who was in control, if you were in control, then you were in total control. And that's where we are now. I'm pretty confident I would not win a gentleman of the House in today's climate. But it is something that, unless the public demands it to be changed, then I don't think we're going backwards, which I felt like was a model that worked better than the current model. But, that's as it relates at the state level. At local levels, I don't think you find that to be the case as much. I think it is still more local issues. People care about, well, what are you going to do about roads? I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. You got to fix the drainage. We're all flooding over here, And so, in a way, that gives me some confidence that maybe ultimately government will start to work better again and get to a point where there's a lot more collaboration in the decision-making processes.
I'll just add a couple of thoughts. Kim said something a little while ago. We have a change management model, and it was like you were describing every element of it. So you start with a shared vision, then you do this, then you do this. I think the idea of political pressure, that means different things to me. There's political pressure that comes when you're an elected official and you have someone who has announced that they want your seat, they want your office, and that's one form of political pressure. There's also political pressure that comes from the public. And the citizens are not wrong. I'm sorry. We may not move somewhere else. If you don't like what the people around you think, then, and I always tell this to my friends who are retiring, everybody wants to move to X. Well, have you been there? Have you actually rented a hotel and stayed there for a while and talked to people in the grocery store? And do you share their values? Is this sort of what you're looking at, or is it nice scenery and a low cost of living, or whatever you think it's, in some just perfect world you're imagining it to be? The reality is that if you are on the opposite side of what the public is saying, you have a choice. And you can either do the best you can to talk about a vision, to try and get them to share a vision. You share data. You share what competitive towns and cities are doing. You share how well some people are doing with similar resources. You share how poorly other people may be doing because they made decisions a certain way. But it's fact-based. And you feed back to people the information that you're getting. You're educating them. You're making them aware. You're helping them to grow in their thinking. But at the end of the day, they either decide that they want to follow your vision or they don't. And I have watched some very, very good men and women step down, decide not to run again. I heard anecdotally that you were getting drainage and pothole calls at 10 o'clock at night the first week that you were elected, and your wife said, this could be a one-term situation, Joel. Is that true? So that's a little bit different. But sometimes you realize that your personal values don't align with a time or a situation or a board or a leadership or whatever. And sometimes you have to make the hard decision to move on. And I really do admire people who do that. But in the meantime, I think you got to give it the big fight. And I think you ought to try. You sit down individually with people. I try and figure out when somebody doesn't like something that I've said or done, or I have somebody in a client organization who seems to continuously sort of pick at projects that we're trying to do. I try and sit down with that person to really understand, what is it? Is this real? Do you know something I don't know? Or is this just for political theater and drama in front of a camera or a group of people or whatever, in which case that's great. If you're doing that for some reason, I won't take it personally. But you got to figure this out. I really do think that you go down with the ship if you can. You keep trying, you try different ways, you try different approaches, but at the end of the day, if the cards are not laid out right and you've done what you can, then I think you pick it up and you dust your dust off your sandals and move on to the next town and bring your talents elsewhere. And I think that there are many people who admire people like that and see them as real heroes. So don't feel bad about what you read sort of in the climate and what you decide to do. A lot of times you're the first brave person in a series of other people, and all of a sudden people pick up their heads and take notice and say, we've got to save this. We're losing a lot of smart and talented people, and they're not wrong. What are they telling us? So anyway, stick with your values and your integrity, and I think you'll do well.
Well, what a pleasure it has been to listen to their feedback and their advice. I hope you took notes today. Please give it up for our panel. Wonderful. Thank you so much for participating and taking your time out to do this today. We really appreciate it. Before you get going, we have our just a few announcements. The first thing is, remember to sign the sign-in sheet before you leave. Also, we'll be sending out an evaluation at the end of tomorrow. Please fill that out for us. It gives us really good, necessary feedback to make this conference great. If you are seeking CLE, please see Liz in the back. She has a sheet for you. And don't leave, because we have one last drawing, and you know you want to win this grand prize. Drum roll, please. The winner is 723080. Yay! Come on forward. Again, can you give them a round of applause for a great panel this afternoon? We will see you tomorrow morning. Have a good evening and safe travels.